John Vervaeke defined relevance realization as the process by which we decide what matters in any given situation. Relevance realization is a framework that conceptualizes an organism's ability to realize relevance as resulting from a dynamical system in which a cognitive agent makes use of opponent processing relationships to zero in on relevant aspects of the world.
And then I asked ChatGPT, and it said relevance realization is our cognitive ability to determine what information in our surroundings is relevant or irrelevant. Given the immense amount of information available to us at every moment, our brains need to identify what's most important and filter out the rest. Vervaeke emphasizes that this process is flexible, constantly adapting based on changes in our environment or incoming information. This process of realizing relevance is a central part of wisdom as he sees it in the sense of discerning what matters most in a given situation. Vervaeke's concept of relevance realization is part of his larger discussion on finding meaning and cultivating wisdom in a secular scientific context, aiming to address what he sees as a meaning crisis in contemporary society. ChatGPT 4.
The good one so far.
I also have another version and generated once again by ChatGPT, but this time it was powered by Bing AI. So I think this is also interesting to share with the audience. Relevance realization is a term coined by Professor John Vervaeke to describe the process of how we select and prioritize information that is relevant to our goals, our interests, and needs. According to Professor Vervaeke, relevance realization is a fundamental aspect of cognition that allows us to recognize patterns and connections in our experiences and to adapt to changing situations. Relevance realization is not a static or fixed property, but a rather dynamic and evolving one that depends on the context and the agent. Professor Vervaeke proposes that relevance realization involves a complex system of trade-offs and constraints that operate together at different levels of abstraction and generalization. He also suggests that relevance realization is related to other cognitive functions such as attention, memory, learning, problem-solving, creativity, and also wisdom. That's about it.
There you go.
Thank you so much for picking up here. Again, welcome. My name is Vervaeke, Lab Discussion Podcast. And today, as you guessed, we discuss relevance realization. I'm sorry for the minor technical problem, and I hope you guys found the way here. And yeah, I would like to ask Valeria to talk a little bit about what we just heard about relevance realization.
The first thing that came to my attention was that the words deciding and choosing can be a little bit misleading because it implies that I decide while a large part of the relevance realization happens outside of consciousness already. So while there is no language for that, right? The mechanisms that decides how the brain decides, so you have to use that language. But that is the one that caught my attention a little bit. And relevant to our goals, that, yeah, but with the caveat that in order to have goals, there is also some relevance realization involved in deciding what, or in knowing how our goals are. So that's another thing that comes to my mind. And last thing that comes to my mind is that when Vervaeke talks about realization, he's always emphasizing the double meaning of the word, of both realizing in the meaning of, oh, I realized that was true, in the meaning of discovering or finding out, and realizing in the sense of making real, like to realize this project and this goal. So we are both discovering and making up the relevance. There's this two sides of it. And the last thing is that it happens by mainly ignoring most of the things that are ignoring most of the things and the zeroing in on what is relevant. So those are the things that come to my mind right now.
In terms of the double meaning of realization, I think it was in Religion Nothingness, where Nishitani calls them the two meanings are actualization and understanding.
Can you expand?
Just like you were saying, there's one term in which realization is understanding. We come to see something that we didn't see before, and there's to make real or to actualize something in the world. So there's the two words I saw used there. And I think that they're the same meaning, that he's talking about them in a different context. Definitely Nishitani is a big influence on John. So.
And I think John kind of mentioned that he uses the word realize in the same meaning as Nishitani. So
yeah.
Yeah, what I wanted to add at this point is that in essence, basically, cognition cannot be separated by context, and that context arises from the individual agent, and the agents, they are embedded within the overall environment. So that's what I get from this discussion so far. What do you think?
To me, of all of John's terms, relevance realization is the one that is sort of hardest for me. Both in the sense of that I don't feel like I get it as much as I do other terms, and in the sense that I hear it a lot in a way that sounds like it's just being misused. So I think that what you were saying, Harris, is definitely to the point, so I don't mean to suggest anything else. I guess the strongest point to add to that I felt was kind of my anchor in grasping what it is in a conversation, I don't remember with whom, John was saying about how it's that thing that you're always doing right now, like that it's what allows for everything else, right? It's that's pretty much the core of what I got from that. He's saying, there are so many things around you that you could be paying attention to. There are so many things in your mind and your memory that you could be paying attention to. And then you just zero in on some things, you completely ignore other things. And right now, that happened continuously, many times. We were all doing that. And to me, at least in terms of where it puts me, I'm still not, I don't feel like I understand it, but it does put me in this kind of aporia. Like there's something about it that is, I know, that is inevitably happening, but what is it that's happening?
So let's think, as I am speaking right now, there are all possible things that are stored in my brain that could possibly come to my attention, come to my memory, could potentially be of use for me to say here, like all the things that I heard about Vervaeke, or the possible combinations. Something in my mind is selecting what I find important that pops into my head that I can talk about right now. And of course, because that thing is so, it happens below, it's more primordial than the thinking, it's before the thinking. It's very hard to grasp because we need it in order to think. So it's hard to really think about it.
And at this point, I think it's helpful to so there's a sense in which, okay, so like why care about this process, right? Because that's what we're trying to describe, is this kind of convoluted or maybe primordial thing that Larry's pointing to. And I think one way of framing it that I've come across is, so basically like our sense of meaning making and connectedness depends on this process of relevance realization. And so if we can understand that, if we can understand what that process is like, then hopefully we can improve our ability to have like more greater frequency, depth, and let's say overall quality meaning making between ourselves and the world. So that's like kind of what's on the table. So the hope is, if we can give a good description of this process, that will empower us to actually be better at meaning making in general. So that's kind of like I think relevant to this point. So tag out.
The
Go ahead, Matthew. Go ahead.
I guess what I was going to point out is I think something that Harris had in his definition from his chat GPT, that this is like a multi-scalar process or a multi-level process, and that like our conceptual framework, well, first of all, our human bodies are only attuned to human level perceptions of all this computational everything. So we're seeing whatever we perceive, we're seeing through the lens of the human body, and then through our biases, and then through visual system, auditory system, etc., on up to words and concepts. And I guess I struggle a little bit. I'm with Claude on this, that the definition, like I struggle with this concept, like having a very clear, sharp definition here, because the words have a lot of double meanings in them. And so like to say that something is relevant sounds like you're making a declaration of fact. You're like, oh, that was relevant. I discovered it was relevant. And that doesn't feel right. Like it's relevant to that being in that process in that moment with the other people there. And you're like, and then, it was relevant because we said it was relevant and it went on to be. But to say like, we're trying to get just the relevant things and practice finding the most relevant, that is not, I think, what's being pointed at here. It's just like there's this process by which you are doing these things where you're choosing what is going to be relevant for you in the moment. And I guess the definition gets a little bit convoluted when I try to look at it. How do you know what's relevant? How do you judge that after the fact? Especially with all this multi-scalar stuff going on.
I think this also just goes to what I just saw in the chat. So Mills 8102 said, I think the hardest thing is that the category of what's relevant is still combinatorially explosive. So even if you say like we found out what was relevant, okay, but what was relevant out of what was relevant, and what was like, there's something about it that
Sure.
still doesn't make sense when you consider it as a sort of discovery, as only the understanding element of realization. You still get to like, okay, so I found that was relevant, but why that relevant thing when there are still too many relevant things?
I mean, the definition of this as a process is really important, because it's not like we talk about the combinatorial explosion things, but it's not that you're computing all the possible things in a moment and putting them in a list and running through it and saying, well, this one looks pretty good. Like that is not at all what's going on. Like you're catching a little thing and then you're threading to another thing and then you're jumping to something else. It's more of like a process of you going to different things. Now, how much weight you give to any one of those and how you navigate that, your attentional space, let's say, that's all part of this relevance realization. But it's like not just evaluating a pile of combinational explosive elements. Go ahead, Valerie.
No, I thought you were finished. The things that you point go exactly to the heart of the problem. It's not in the organism, and it's also not in the world. It's always in the interaction, in the fittedness between the organism and the world, like Harry was talking about. We don't think in a vacuum. We always cognize. We are always cognizing in a situation, in a particular state of mind. And the relevance realization is always bound to the interaction between the organism and the environment in the moment. So it's always these two components. It's transjective in that way. And the other thing that you pointed out, let me finish that. Okay, no, you go first, and then I go
Just
back.
about that specific point, because I still don't understand
Mhm.
how relevance realization and participatory knowing that you talked about last week are related, because isn't that, like you were saying about how the environment and the organism are co-shaping each other in that process, but that's participatory knowing. So how are they related? I mean, just maybe it's a terms thing, but it seems like they're really pointing at something that's the same. Go ahead, Henry.
What I wanted to add in this very interesting discussion, it also has to do with something with what Valeria said before earlier regarding this selector that somehow subconsciously is at work there and tries to parse and pick up the different patterns that unfold, let's say, between the individual agent and the environment. And how I understand John's work is that, let's suppose that we are in a group setting and there is an event taking place that affects everyone within that group. Let's say it has to do with a particular melody. Let's not make it something more dramatic, let's say. So maybe some of the participants of that group, like a subgroup, they parse reality in a very specific way that is not necessarily the same as the way that the other members of that group parse it. So what I want to point out here is that we human beings, we are subjected to cognitive biases, and maybe sometimes we are subjected to the very same ones. So this is why most of the times we are doing, let's say, some errors, but maybe our errors are also picked up by other individuals. So this type of errors, they are propagated for a reason. You understand?
I think so. Yeah, like if you make some cognitive error and then you're projecting that out and you see someone else do that same thing, you may well mistake that for confirmation. Like, oh, look, see, I'm right. Others are doing the same thing. And it might just be that you're suffering from a common, or the two have the same bias.
It has to do, like, also from information theory, let's say a signal that gets augmented. This is how I understand it.
I think I can link that to what Gilad was talking before, between participatory knowing and relevance realization. So I'm making this up on the fly, so I cannot guarantee that it's going to be coherent. But the types of knowing, John, I think, uses knowing as how we come in contact with the world. So the participatory knowing is the knowing the world or knowing things. It doesn't need to be the world. Like, it's the knowing that I know through interacting with the thing. And relevance realization is the process through which we decide, or it's the process through which the mind makes / discovers things that are important and relevant to us. It's very hard to talk about it because our cognitive grammar doesn't have language to describe those things. So one is talking about knowing, the other is talking about what is important, and they are super related because we know what's important somehow, right? We kind of don't bother interacting with things that are completely unimportant to us. If we're interacting with it in order to know it, it has to have some importance. For example, the region of the eye that we can see sharp, it's like a thumb. If you put your arm The region of your thumbnail is what you can see sharp. Everything else is a little bit blurry. We don't even notice that, because if we find something interesting, we just point our eyes at it. So we only see what we find important. And what we find important is what we see. So there is this loop there. That is the recursive part of the recursive relevance realization. We can influence that, but it's much less than what would appear to us. At least that's how I see it. How does it land?
No, it is very good that you've mentioned the recursive nature of relevance realization. It's very important that when we get these feedback loops and back into the system, we get a higher order, let's say, of understanding of what is taking place. And you've mentioned the different aspects, and what popped into my mind as relevant is the 5 A's of consciousness that John Vervaeke also calls. If I'm not mistaken, is the awakeness, awareness, access, authority, and aspectuality. So also this I find relevant to this and associated with this concept that we're discussing. And yeah, sometimes I think of them as part of a framework, let's say, where, or a toolcase where different tools they are inside of it. And relevance realization is the big box, let's say, where everything fits.
It's the thing that Matthew said, right? It happens at different scales. So it's hard to wrap the head around. Sorry, Matthew, go ahead.
One of the things I wanted to go into is, like, we tend to talk about this just like in terms of a single event. We will say, like, did you notice it, or was it relevant to you? But this, I'll say the system that's going on is definitely more complicated than that, because, for example, it seems pretty common for people to have, I'll say, a narrative, a story, usually something pretty simple of, I saw this and I saw this other thing, and I kind of have a theory as to how that goes together. And now I'm looking out into the world for stuff that shows that that's true. Ideally, you'd say, true or false, but really you're trying to confirm your thing. So this confirmation bias to try to fill in a narrative. And I'm pretty sure it's very cognitively well known, of, like, you avoid the things that disagree with your story or your hypothesis, and you're very drawn to things that support it. And so even though you may notice it, like in the attentional space, and like you read the words, you judge it and you go like, that's not important. Or, oh my God, that's so important. That is, oh, look, it proves the theory. And so it's not just the pure attentional space. Like, you heard the words or whatever, you were paying attention, you processed whatever the person said, but then you made a judgment. And so in that space, you're still navigating this relevance realization thing, because you're deciding how this fits into this narrative structure that you are holding. So that's just like an example of one of the things that we do where we're trying to, like, fulfill this narrative that is altering the way that we even see which parts of what we're seeing we think are important or not.
So there are two things that come to mind in order to sort of try to, I don't know, maybe get a clearer picture for me. So one is every type of knowing has a memory associated with it. So the perspectival memory is episodic memory, and procedural is procedural memory, and propositional is
Semantic.
thematic. Wow.
Semantica.
Semantic, yeah, that's right, semantic. And the one with participatory, John says, that's the self, right? The memory that's related with participatory knowing is the self.
Yeah.
So he also, and the second thing is that John equates relevance realization to the same process as evolution, right? So he's saying that there's a deep continuity between the way organisms at large do relevance realization by branching out, and then selection pressure narrows it down to how our cognition does relevance realization. You sort of mind wander and then you focus, mind wander, and focus. So if I'm getting it right, the relevance realization is that sort of movement, that sort of process where things branch out and contract with accordance to some external pressure or selection pressure. And I guess in ourselves, the selection pressure is like Matthew and Harris were saying, something about our predisposition, our environment, our narrative. Like all of these things need to weigh in, and with evolution, it's just survival, like the ones that fit or manage to create a niche for themselves. So I'm wondering if that means that relevance realization is a sort of how to say it, like a local thing, like you can always just sort of branch out from who you, like the self that currently is, and just like slowly you're kind of moving around by expanding what you are and then contracting it, and that way you're becoming something else in terms of your participatory knowing. Am I just rambling at this point?
Hold on, Gilad, let me address a little bit. There are a few things, and I'm glad you brought it up. So in case of, let's say, evolution, I really like how we evolved, and the current form that the species are, or the birds who evolved like special beaks and wings and stuff like that, it's whatever females found relevant at that time, like whatever stood out to them, and they picked up on it. And so the evolution itself, we continue paying attention to the things that are important to us, that are salient to us, that we care about, and we pick those up. In case of breeding, let's say we pick up on people who possess the qualities we care about. So that's one thing. But relevance and relevance realization, I think John distinguishes those. So relevance itself is extremely subjective. It can't be really like, it differs from person to person. It can't be really defined like as a theory. That's why relevance realization was shaped as a theory, because it's a different thing. And I prepared a clip for that. But if you guys would like, feel like we can move to that point.
I would love to see the clip. I just want to say that maybe what you're describing there is recursive relevance realization, or the evolution of relevance realization, like not relevance realization itself.
So guys, it's the first time I'm sharing a clip. So if you have a technical problem, I'm sorry. I will do better next time.
Okay.
John.
There it is.
All right. Like I keep the tab on because I try to respond to the people in the thingy thing. So here in the episode 29, John talks about the difference between relevance and relevance realization.
Account of relevance realization, and bear with me on this because there's an important way in which I'm going to modify this, right? But our account of relevant realization has to be completely internal. Now, what do I mean by that? It has to work in terms of goals that are, at least initially, are internal to the brain and emerge developmentally from it. Why? Look, any goal in which the brain is representing or referring to something in the world can't be the place where we can generate an explanation of relevance. Because insofar as I'm representing a goal to myself, I've already got the capacity for relevance realization. The goals that are the originating source of relevance realization have to be internal to the relevance realization process. Now, what does that mean? The goals have to be goals that are constitutive. What are constitutive goals? Constitutive goals are goals that a system or process have that helps to constitute it for being what it is. And this is especially the case for autopoietic systems. We've talked about this. Okay. Living things are not only self-organizing. Living things are self-organized because they have the constitutive goal of preserving their own self-organization. To be alive is to have, or maybe even better, to be the goal of preserving the self-organization that is giving rise to you. That's a constitutive goal. Autopoietic things are self-organized such that they can protect and promote. They're constituted to protect and promote their own self-organization. Which means we should see that there's going to be a deep connection between your ability to do relevance realization and being an autopoietic thing. Because relevance realization ultimately has to work in terms of autopoietic systems. Systems that have goals that are completely internal in the constitutive sense. Now that's important because that means there's going to be a deep connection between doing relevance realization and being a living thing. Next, so when I say internal, I mean autopoietically internal. Our theory of relevance realization has to talk in terms of processes that are scale invariant. Relevance realization has to act simultaneously at multiple levels, local and global, featural, gestalt, and it has to do it in a self-organizing fashion such that it is capable of insight, self-correction. And that means, of course, and that ties in again with being autopoietic, that the relevance realization process has to be fundamentally self-organizing in nature. Okay. Now, we hit a problem here. And it's a problem that might derail the whole project. And it might make it sound like the attempt to give a scientific explanation of relevance realization is impossible. Now notice I've been sort of playing between those and treating them as synonymous, a theory of relevance and a theory of relevance realization. That's ultimately because I've been dodging an issue. Because I'm going to argue you can't identify them. Because here is what I want to argue. Or at least I'm going to state what the argument is going to be, and then we're going to pick it up in the next video. I'm going to argue that we cannot have a scientific theory of relevance. We cannot have a scientific theory of relevance. I'm going to try and argue that that tells us something very deep about the nature of relevance, and therefore something deep about the nature of meaning and our attempts to explain, articulate, and celebrate our meaning-making capacities. But I'm going to ultimately argue that that is no reason for despair. Because what I'm going to argue is that the fact that we don't have a theory of relevance doesn't preclude us from having a theory of relevance realization. In fact, it will give us a good understanding of what a theory of relevance realization is, and that will help us because we will realize, pun intended, that all we ever needed was a theory of relevance realization. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
So real quick,
I'm-
there's a parallel that I think is worth emphasizing, which is the idea that he can't give some theory relevance. This is he maps this in other conversations to like the sense of fittedness. So like an organism, like what it means for a thing to be fit, right? For an organism to its niche or its environment. That cashes out differently, right? So like a shark is really not fit if you throw it in the desert, but it's totally fine if you throw it in an ocean, right? So that's like the kind of parallel here where it's like, what it means to be fit, there is no consistent thing of what it means to be fit, but you can give a theory of how fitness comes about, and that is the theory of evolution, which is a combination of natural and sexual selection. And similar, like, that you can't say what it means to be relevant, but you can, at least Vervaeke's arguing, you can give a theory of the process of how that comes about, how things become relevant, which is what he's calling relevance realization. All right, end of thought.
That was good.
Quick question. Can we substitute relevant with important without losing much? Because if I think that instead of relevance, I think like we are trying to talk about what's important. How do we know what's important in any situation? That
I find that
feels much more alive to me.
I find that interesting. I'd love to just mention that I've been thinking about that for a bit. I wrote in the comments or in the chat, relevance cognate with relieve or relief. And I was wondering to everybody here, if anybody here would like to talk about, like, if relevance is cognate with relief or relieve, who is being relieved and what are they being relieved of?
What I can add to this point, Carl, is that Professor Vervaeke, what he says is that deep connections exist between relevance realization, cognition, and agency. So to what you say with relief is I parse it as release. So to be released to move away from non-sense making and closer to sense making. This is how I understand relief. It's like I think Burke talk about this notion of the delight. So it's not like something that gives you pleasure because it's positive, but it's the pleasure that arises from the removal of negativity, let's say. This is how I understand it.
It sounds like being relieved of chaos
and pain too.
And pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely from noise, because what relevance realization is doing is basically ignoring things. It's. I think somebody mentioned it. It's not examining. That's not important. That's not important. That's not important. No. It just never even is not even aware of what is deemed irrelevant. So it's in a way relieving us from the combinatorial explosive nature of the world.
It sounds like it's a direct and immediate relief from the meaning crisis.
And nihilism also I think moving away from nihilism too. This is one of the topics that John is trying to promote in his latest course. So maybe there is also some connection there with meaning crisis and moving away from nihilism.
That sounds like it speaks to a little bit to the who is being relieved of that chaos, like the just thinking again of the headless way, and how he makes a big deal about, Douglas Harding makes a big deal about nothingness. I think in a similar way that the writer Gilad mentioned, the Japanese writer
Nishitani.
Yeah. And I was, it seems like nothingness does not exist, but it's real, in a way. Like it doesn't exist, because to exist means to come out of something, to exist. But real, like what's real? Like if I say a thing is real, it seems like it's more real if it lasts a long time, if it's bigger, if it's, if I look everywhere and I see it. What's more real? I don't have an answer for this, but like is it the paperclip, or is it the factory that makes the paperclip? Like it seems like the factory that makes the paperclip in some ways might be more real, because you can make a whole bunch of paperclips. And that nothingness, perceptually, like Douglas Harding talks about how phenomenologically you can see the world unfolding within you if you identify with that nothingness. And it seems like that I'm proposing that relevance realization is happening only now, like Valeria said, and it's only as I'm witnessing the world unfold within me as nothingness that I can point to relevance realization. And as soon as I put any name on it or start talking about it, that's something, that's now the moment of relevance realization, and my thoughts are more relevant. And to mix things up further, I wanted to, it seems like it makes a bit of sense to me to think of what is being made relevant as the feminine, the matter, the mother. The masculine is the thing that points to it. And my awareness is, so it's like the mother, the father, and the holy child. The holy child being the awareness that brings that matter, brings that field of being, and the distinguishing a thing in that field of being together in this moment. Like it's just every moment is that. That probably didn't make any sense.
No, a little bit, but I want to, so the interpretation or the framework through Mother and the Holy Spirit and Father, like this is a framework through which I can see things possibly, but there are other ways.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back a little bit to earlier to the nothingness. It made me think of Viennese coffee. So in Vienna, you have a special culture of drinking coffee, which it would be the coffee cup and the water. So you drink a sip of coffee, freshly brewed coffee, and then you drink a sip of water. So you need to experience nothingness in order, like the plain taste, in order to experience the taste of coffee. So, and you have to shift between one and the other. So let's say the taste of coffee is the relevant thing that you need to realize. But in order to realize it, you need to compare it to, so it's like maybe perspectival knowing, I would say. It's not actually like participative, but it's a perspectival, which is in the moment. So that nothingness thing, it's like that water, plain cup of water that you comparing the taste to, let's say. So that one stood out to me. I don't know what you guys think about.
I want to
point
one thing that seems relevant, so that we don't confuse things. Even somebody in the depths of nihilism is doing relevance realization. Like without relevance realization, you cannot talk, you cannot act, like you cannot eat, you cannot drink the glass of water. So you can say that somebody in the depths of the meaning crisis is doing a worse type of relevance realization than somebody that is very fitted to their environment, in a way that they know to find important the things that are important.
Can you though? I mean, that's what I really want to know. Can you though?
Uh-huh.
Can you say worse type of relevance realization and better type? Isn't that?
I would say I can. Go ahead. I can make a case for
Oh.
why I would, but then
I've had horrible relevance realization for years as a practicing alcoholic. It was, I can tell you, it was internal suffering every moment at times. It was pretty bad. There's definitely, yeah.
Make a case.
I'll try to just to clarify what I'm trying to point to, because I'm not saying all people's actions and worldviews are equivalent or anything like that. I'm just asking whether the term relevance realization is the right term to describe this.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying, because you're saying, you know, when I was in that state, like who I was, what I was doing, what appeared salient to me, all of those things were really bad for me. I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
Can we say, and that's what I'm trying to understand, can we say that that's worse relevance realization? Because relevance realization just seems to me like if it's that process of variation and selection.
That's the evolution of relevance realization. That's the recursive relevance realization.
Okay.
So you go through that process, and hopefully, at least that's the way I understand it. I would not bet my money on it, but if you go through that process, then you can get a better a more well-fitted relevance realization machinery that will make salient to you the things that should be more salient. That will make you more adapted, more fitted to the environment.
Why do we need to say relevance realization rather than self in this context? Isn't it making yourself more attuned?
The self is my, I mean, there's probably a few different ways you could use that word, but it seems like in this context, it's my experience of myself. And then there's my idea of myself, which is part of my experience of myself. And I mean, I see how the self could be used that way, but I can't have an idea of relevance realization. It seems like it's what's the relevance realizer that's showing me these words? That's I can't have an idea that encompasses all of that, you know? Does that make any sense?
Maybe in the sense that it's pointing, like you're saying, there's my autobiographical self, and maybe you have the experienced self, and I'm talking about the sort of self that's related with the participatory knowing with the environment. And I don't want to, like, I feel like this, I'm kind of getting into a lot of words, so I'll just try to say as plainly as I can. What I mean is it just seems to me like there's a certain personification of relevance realization that I don't get. Like like people are saying my relevance realization or relevance realization is doing this, or yeah. So that's where I'm trying to sort of find that distinction.
Well, but
Interesting.
so
allow me, Gilad, to offer something that came into my mind as I was hearing you. Imagine the following scenario. Imagine that there is, let's talk about a band, not about a single individual artist, but about a band, okay? And the record label asks them to create a compilation, let's say. So what the band will end up with, it's gonna be a best of compilation album, right? Now, imagine the scenario where that band was comprised only by a set of pessimists. They will probably call that compilation the least worst, let's say, instead of the best of. So this is how I can see it in terms of the two different perspectives. Let's say it's not the good or bad, but maybe it's the more optimistic and the less optimistic side of it, of things. This is what I wanted to add to that.
Oh, okay. I want to give the word to Kevin, and then to Valerie, and then to Matthew.
Yeah, I guess. So I want to first clarify, like, so Gilad, like, is part of the problem you're wondering is like, does it make sense to say there's better or worse types of relevance realization? First off, is that like a concern? That's okay, cool. All right, so if that's like part of the question that Gelato's maybe wondering into, I kind of, because I'm pulling it back to like the analogy between like fitness and theory of evolution, right, and relevance and theory of relevance realization, that in some sense, there is a way you can say like this shark is failing at fittedness in the desert, but in a different environment, it like is actually more, I guess, in tune or attuned to the environment. And I guess using that analogy, maybe there's, and this is just a tentative proposal, I guess, like maybe there's a way you can do that in relevance realization, where you say, yeah, like there's a way in which these two things are like the variation selection is all becoming much, much smaller, right? And so like, and because I'm like, I have no more variation, I have only one thing, and the only thing I can select is this one thing, so my selection is narrowed. Like in that sense, I think you can come up with this, like, I don't want to call it objective, but like some kind of like because it's just a metric. It's a metric on like how fitted are these two things to the environment. But I guess like a counter argument to this that Gilad might be thinking about is like, well, yeah, but what if you're just like super fitted to this environment, right? By having addiction to whatever it is. And it's like, and so you can only think of yourself as like, let's say a methamphetamine addict or something. And like, because of that, it's like, does it make sense to say that relevance realization went wrong, or is it just doing what it does, but in like kind of a parasitic pathological way? First off, is that like, Glad, does that like resonate at all?
Up to a point. Like the problem is that for me, you found a metric relevant in order to describe relevance realization, right? You needed to do the thing in order to explain the thing. So it's, I think it's homuncular. Right.
Can I try one thing? If I say instead of my relevance realization is bad, or how about my relevance realization machinery is not working well?
I'm just more confused now. Honestly,
Okay.
I don't know.
So
This might be more confusing. Okay. Yep.
I'll throw in
the thing that is.
Oh, go ahead.
That the thing that is doing the relevance realization is doing it in a way that my fittedness to the environment is suffering. Now I'm finished.
I'm thinking of the drug addict who, like, they're real, to use that example, the mechanism works fine. Like they could wake up in the morning and be, supposing they're addicted to some opioid, and so their body is telling them like, I need opioid, I need a thing. And so their whole morning might be tuned to, you know, I think there's a half vial of whatever this stuff is that's laying around down at the park. So I just need to find that, and then I will be okay. And so they set themselves this mission of, you know, I'm going to just walk through the park, and I know they're little blue vials. And so I'm really just going to kind of focus on blue things. And hey, look, there's one. So like the goal that they set, you know, we're like, well, is it relevant? Is it a good fit? You're like, their world was, I need opioid. That's their environment. I'm living in an environment where my body needs opioid. So my realization system is like, whatever you can do to find me some of that stuff. And then, you know, past experiences, knowing the color of the thing and all that. So I don't like this space of like the mechanism is broken, or, you know, this is more relevant than that, or can we compare the two? And it all feels like after the facts, things that you're not doing in the moment to quote find relevance, and we're just sort of armchair quarterbacking it. So I would propose that the drug dealer who's seeking out drugs in the morning is completely, like, his relevance realization machinery is totally working.
Well, but it's not true that his whole world is the drug, right? He still needs to eat. He still needs to have a house. He still needs relationships to feel good. And
But like,
he is
what
ignoring all
feels
of that because of the drug.
Yeah, because the thing that feels most important to him that in the moment, because like maybe his body, I don't know, his body's aching or whatever, that then develops the relevance, the importance. Wow, the words. That's how he knows what he's seeking and sets that goal. And then that goal ends up framing, you know, what he finds
Exactly.
relevant.
But that's
Quick
maladaptive.
question. Quick
But I
question.
mean, the mechanism working.
So, quick question. When you say better relevance realization, Valeria or Kevin or Carl, do you mean wisdom? Or like, is that,
Yeah.
are we?
That's a great. I love these questions, Gilad. You're relentless, and I love it. It's really making me think. I love your relentlessness. And what if relevance realization does not exist? What if relevance realization is the act of existing? Like realization, one of the definitions, you mentioned two different definitions of it, like there's the knowing and the knowing of it. There's
The understanding and the actualization.
The understanding of the exact, thank you. So would this be wrong to say it's noticing it and then there's actually expressing that it's real, noticing that something's real, and then exhibiting that it's real, like to myself, like those two different ways of looking at realization. And we're only looking at one of those. Maybe we're only looking at noticing that the thing exists. And so if going back to nothingness, this silly idea of nothingness being real and more real than anything, then relevance realization would be the coming, whatever, like I don't experience it. You asked why, if it's not the self, I don't experience what I only experienced. I just experienced the world unfolding in front of me. And it kind of creates this nothingness. That creates a need for nothingness for the world to come out of, this idea of relevance realization.
I want to address the two things here. Carl, I have read lately on Twitter that nothingness doesn't exist.
I don't think it does.
Quantum. Yeah. It's all quantum foam. It's a theory, though. Like, again, it's a speculation. The people, there is no proof to that, but like one of the theories that nothingness does not exist either, which is like a mind bender.
I'd love to push back on that, but yes, thank you.
Yeah, but back to Gilad a little bit, and drug addiction. So I was thinking, let's say everything that's happening in our life is like this Rorschach test. So we just see stains everywhere. And however we interpret all those stains is whatever is relevant to us. So let's take a simple case of a person looking for more drugs. So everything will be put into frame of how I will get drugs. So there is this experience coming. Yes, this is the thing I can use to get thing, or this thing is not useful, so I cannot get drugs. It's a simple case. Let's say simplified. version. So relevance is whatever we care about, whatever we want to have more of in our life. And we see the world and we pick up as if it's a field of berries, but we only want the red ones. And we only care for the red berries. And we will go, even though there will be a lot of other things, we will still pick up the red berries. So relevance is the little thing we care about. And better relevance realization, I think, is the trained skill that would allow us to notice it faster and better. That's my proposition.
I think John pushes back a bit on what you were saying in some conversations. Like, he clearly says, like, people are not just projecting onto the world. The world is not a Rorschach test where we're just projecting what we think, like the romantics would say. And at the same time, it's also not the opposite. It's not just we're a blank slate and the world just imprints knowledge onto us. It kind of links in with the rest of the things in a way that I think maybe a part of what I was missing is when we were talking about relevance realization, the part that is missing, maybe at least for me, is that part where we do have like when we do something, right, we are fitting our world to us also. It's not just us fitting to the world, which is a blank slate. We are also doing niche construction. And in that sense, like there's that second meaning of realization. Yeah, but I still have a lot of questions. I don't know. It's just it's a really complicated term, and I guess the most important question, and I will have to leave in like a few minutes.
No.
But like I think the most important question for me, which is, I don't know, probably a bit ironic, if that's the right term of the word, is what makes the term relevance realization even relevant for this conversation?
I think it's a word that that talks about a frame shift that we need to do as we're talking between the as if world and the as is world distinction that Harris posted in the chat. You know, like we talk about, there's scientific theories. It's like there's this frame shift that we're talking through, and all these words lose their meaning, because in the world as it's given to me, the one I experience is completely phenomenological. Like I only know the world through these things that are happening, and part of what's happening is that there's this big negative. There is a non-information carrying part of my sensual field, my sensory fields. There's a non-information carrying part of my sensory fields that we do not talk about, and it seems I'm proposing that that's nothingness. That's the perception of nothingness. When I look,
sorry, how does that relate to like because you said that relevance realization maybe is a word for frame shifting between and something. And
yes, thank you. Yes,
so
exactly.
How does that relate?
Thanks for getting me back on point. So what if, this maybe goes against what John would say, but what if relevance realization is noticing that I am, that I have a will, and I'm being, that I want, my will is that the world should make sense, should have good orderly direction. And I am at the mercy of whatever it is that creates relevance realization, creates the world.
And that
shows
happens simultaneously from the relevance realization, noticing that I am or I have a will. That's like this process of world creating. Am I right?
And I just got lost in my own words. So if you guys can make sense of it.
It's okay. I will save you guys by showing another clip before Gilad goes. So
I'll go, and then you can see it.
Okay. Thank you for being
Hi,
here.
Gilad. Thank you for being relentless.
It was a pleasure. And,
Skeptic.
I'll catch up with the rest when I got back. Bye.
Okay, bye. Nice. Now the entire screen shifted. So I want to show another clip which talks about relevance realization and care, and also combinatory explosion. And why do we need relevance? Let's say.
We've already seen that this relevance realization is transjective. It's about our fundamental connectedness to the world, connectedness of mind-body together. I'll have to come back to connectedness to other people. that relevance realization is always deeply effective, that at the core of relevance realization is a caring that is integral to your cognitive commitment of your precious cognitive, metabolic, and temporal resources. We've already seen that.
Okay, so what I wanted to talk about a little bit is the thing we care about is the part of how we interact with the world. Like it's this frame filters, let's say, that we will put and find things important in reality for us. Everything else that we don't care about, but if we would not have this mechanism, we would overload our capacity for thinking, making decisions. It would immobilize us in a sense. So I wanted to throw it into the room.
Can you paraphrase that? I'm sorry. I feel lost.
Okay, we need to care for things, and the things we care about we find relevant. That's how a simple.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
the simplified version of what John just said. The way I understood it. Am I right?
At this point, if you allow me, I wanted to also mention one of the co-authors of John is Brett Anderson, and they published a couple of papers together on relevance realization and how it interacts, let's say, with Anderson's work on his PhD. And basically, what they are, the main point there is that relevance realization has to do with competing interactions leading to self-organized criticality. And that also leads to a higher level of integration. And at that particular point, because there is also a very nice talk between the two of them, during that talk, John made the connection with the deep continuity hypothesis. So when they continue on this line of thought, they made also the following point, that hierarchical complexity arises through these competing interactions, which according to John, this is all about opponent processing. So bringing together these conflicting interactions and labeling it and giving it a name, as John did with opponent processing, is very important to help us delve in this recursive relevance realization that autopoietic system engage in. This is what I wanted to add.
Thank you for that. That's awesome. Yeah. I would like to hear from Valeria this time.
So the recursive part is what makes it difficult to think about, because you pay attention to what you care about, and you care about things that you cannot care about something that is outside of your consciousness. So that there is this, the recursive part of the recursive relevance realization is something that makes it a little bit difficult to wrap our heads around. And Harris was talking about autopoietic systems, autopoietic, I don't know how to pronounce that, systems, and also going back to the example with the only caring about red berries. If you only care about red berries, you will die. So one of the things that the relevance realization machinery should be able to do is to, well, make relevant to you things that are like things that you need in order to maintain yourself as an organism alive. And that goes for maintaining your body, but also for maintaining like yourself and your mind. So that came out a lot less coherent than I hoped it would be, but I hope you can get something out of it.
For a long time, to combine that, I hope, with what you had said earlier about something you said earlier. I forget how you put it, but back when I was an active alcoholic, for years, I had intrusive suicidal thoughts, like suicidal ideation, over and over again. That's what was salient. That's what it kept seeming relevant, and also like in the sense of being a relief that, oh, I could jump off that bridge, I could jump in front of that bus. Like it was a relief. There was a time even after, I was in, I had a gun in a safe, and I would just think of that and just go like, oh my God, it's my choice to put up with this. I can just at any moment check out. And this brings me to, I'm wondering if it would add confusion or order to think about who this is happening to. Like for me, that's the main issue. Like what's it, that guy Einstein, he according to that quote that I see all over, he said the most important thing every man, woman, and child must ask themselves is the universe friendly? And like that kind of implies that I'm separate in a way from the universe. Or, like I see that as, is the world friendly? Like this world within me. And why do I keep getting pulled back into this world of things when I could just have eternal peace? That's, like along the lines of Shakespeare, like that's the question, to be or not to be. Like, I wonder if it seems like that's the basic thing I'm relieved of, and the basic thing I'm looking for with the meaning crisis is, what the hell's going on right now? What's this mean? I don't know if that speaks to anything.
Thank you for sharing that. Actually, the things that are relevant to us And I heard that before, that think that the questions of should I be here? And then the things that we find relevant are the bus, the trail, the gun.
Relief.
They're very
Mhm.
relevant because they are associated with the thing we're contemplating at the moment. Yes, it's a very relatable example that you gave, Carl. I was thinking about that, like I would get in the news a lot of information, but I would reframe that information in the head by whatever is important to me. Let's say for me, important safety of some people, like the people I care about. Not all of them, like not all 52 million of them, but let's say some 10 people that I actually really love. And then I would watch the entire news and think how that reality will affect these 10 people that I care about. Because we need, if I were to think about all the other people, my head would explode. I need to narrow it to those 10 that I care about. So that clip that I shared, relevance and care, is and combinatory explosion. All of that paint a good picture of what we find important in life and what we find meaningful. And yet there is this choice. There is this shift, we can shift that. There is like some seer behind our eyes that can shift it. But like, I still think it's a question of will and practice.
And
Will.
practice.
Yeah, and practice. Yes. Just throw it out there.
This is a bit of a perceptual thing, but along the lines of you being able to tune your relevance realization to some extent. Playing disc golf, I'm not that good at it. So I often will chuck a disc in the woods somewhere. And especially in the fall here, we've got a lot of deciduous trees. So you'll throw a yellow disc, and during the summer, it's pretty easy to spot. And during the fall, there's a lot of yellow leaves mixed in there. And so when somebody will lose a disc, then there's multiple people looking for it. We inform one another what color disc we're looking for. And if somebody tells you like it's a blue disc, you can tune your perceptual system so that you notice the blue. Like you can kind of just fuzz your eyes and look kind of more broadly and go like, oh, there's a blue thing, there's a blue thing, you know, and you rule it out. You're like, I keep coming back to this bottle that happens to be blue, so let me pick it up so I don't keep getting drawn to it. Anyway, so realizing that even on the automatic stuff that's going on, that's helping to form your landscape that you're choosing from, you can influence that. You can kind of prime it and have, you're not only going to see the blue things, but just by making a commitment to being able to notice some of these things, I have found in my own experience that people find the disc faster. And so that really does, to me, point out that there's some tunability here, that we have some control, even over the sort of subconscious level of tuning for this.
Of course, otherwise, why would we be practicing?
Yeah, so that's like an example of a practice. You're like, oh, right, what? Just stopping to think, like, what else am I not seeing here?
Well, and it's funny because I think that is part of like what justifies the process of trying to understand relevance realization, is that like once you have like a language for a thing, it becomes like instead of you just being in the water, you become aware of the water that you're in. And so that makes this like kind of shift where you're like, oh, okay, so now I'm noticing the process of my process of noticing stuff. And so in doing that, I think the language gives us access to this capacity to practice kind of awareness of that process, which allows us to actually fine tune it to hopefully be in service to our I guess our better selves. And I wish Galato was still on here because I was thinking about how he asked, like, you know, what was his question? Because I remember like I came up with here it is. It's is better relevance realization just wisdom? And I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, it's actually, I think it's better to think of it, it's like it's converging towards wisdom, and that's like this kind of process of us hopefully minimizing, right, self-destructive processes or different like cognitive biases. But anyway, tag out.
I just had an insight that a very relevant thing for me, like relieving and significant thing for me, is equanimity. And that it kind of touches on, and that, you know, I learned this in, you know, my experiments with cold plunge. You know, if I just treat the cold and the warmth and the nothingness that's surrounding all my sensations, all give them all equal weight in what I'm telling myself to look for, then my body calms down and I don't shiver. And I told Matthew Algernon this the other day, and Kevin and Kara, that, you know, I was practicing that for years. I was practicing cold water plunge exposure for years, and I was getting worse and worse and worse until I started having equanimity about it, like practicing equanimity in the moment. And that, you know, that points to why I find it, you know, Douglas Harding's work so pertinent, is because it's, you know, perceiving that nothingness, just noticing that it's part of my experience, gives me equanimity, the perception of it. So I don't have to decide to not like something more and like another thing less. I just go, those are two things, and they're inside of nothingness. And then equanimity seems to come afterwards. And so then it's such a relief for meaning to the question of whether or not this is a friendly world. And see, yeah. And so, and if that is the most important question in my life, the one I'm faced with it in every moment of being, then it would affect all the little ones, you know, all the little relationships and my care about all the people in my life and everything. I'm trailing off.
No, that's good, Carl. Based on that, what I wanted to say is that by assigning meaning, let's say, upon things via meaningful imposition based on past experiences, what we are capable of achieving is to view or even taste what is transcendent, let's say. So this might be a bit philosophical or abstract, but this is how I parse this.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, that touching that nothingness is, it's so unremarkable unless I'm in suffering. And then it's like, oh my gosh, that is transcendence. I'm transcending this moment. Like I'm in this room and I'm having the experience of this room being inside of me. And then I'm free to let my meaning maker go from there, as opposed to where it was in my narrative self,
I understand
just moments before.
Yeah, I understand it just a bit differently.
Yes.
From the perspective of a phenomenon called deja vu. So every time I engage in something like that reminds me of a previous moment, and it feels like I've relived it in a way. So that's how I understand it. Maybe it wasn't an actual experience. Maybe it was a dream or that I don't remember, or something, a movie that I've watched years ago. But it feels as if I relived that moment, let's say. Even if it was the first time it happened.
Okay. So I wanted to show the clip that Harris made for Douglas, with Douglas Harding, for that fits Carl's story. But before that, I promise I will show it, guys, at the end. We are never in the end, by the way. Before that, I want to show very quickly 2 clips that talk about inference and equivocation. It will take 2 minutes, and I would like to discuss that because it in the context of what we find relevant in our capacity to bullshit in ourselves. Let's say, so the darker side of relevance realization. I hope it will make more sense the moment I will show it. Which one is this? Implication, we see inference. So, and that's okay, yeah. So I will start with implication versus inference.
John is always saying that the same mechanisms that make us adaptive are the ones that make us prone to self-deception. So.
Yes, yeah, that's my favorite one, actually. I really enjoy that.
You have to make a distinction between implication, right, and inference. People sometimes confuse these together. So implication is a logical relationship based on syntactic structures and rules, a logical relationship between propositions. So here's an abstract symbol. So if I have A and B, and I know that's true, I can conclude that B is true. I don't know what B is. See, I don't have any semantic content. It is purely syntactic, but I can derive that. Now, when we try to think about implications, what we have to remember is an inference is when you're actually using an implication relation to change your beliefs. You have to make a distinction between implication, right, and inference.
Back to where we started.
Exactly. I mean, the other clip is very short and related to that one as well. So it's very much earlier, 3 episodes earlier.
The ridiculousness of this argument. Now, why is the argument ridiculous? Because the argument hinges on this, right? And that because I'm using the same term, it sounds like I can make the inference. But of course, although I'm using the same word, I'm not meaning the same thing. This means no thing from the set of things that makes life worth living is better than long life and happiness. This means no thing from the set of things you should eat. And those are not equivalent sets. There's not equivalent reference. If you don't keep track of what your words mean, that's why I'm always so careful to try and give you like the meaning of things and the history of the meaning of a term. If you don't get sensitive to the meaning of terms, you'll fall into equivocation, which is a disastrous way to try and reason about anything. The ridiculousness of this argument. Now, why is the argument ridiculous?
Okay.
You didn't. You skipped the argument. I think it was.
Oh, the argument was that nothing is better than a sandwich or something, and then nothing is worth living for. And so he used those 2 words and equivocated them in one sentence. I mean, I like the argument itself was a little bit ridiculous. That's why I did not use it. And thankfully, like Gilad actually pointed me to that one, and he said it's ridiculous. So that's why I did not use it. I focused on the equivocation itself. So the way we bullshit ourselves in our head, we find that salient to us thing, and then we will like. This salient thing to us stands out, it's important to us, but then the other thing is also salient and important, and we like combine those 2 together even and in order to bullshit ourselves, like in order to change our own beliefs. So the inference, let's say, let me, I'm just like inference and inference equivocation. Okay. Yeah, so we use implication for inference and then inference for equivocation. That's a very confusing magic out there. Yeah, but Harris will have an answer.
I just wanted to say that both of these terms, like implication and inference, can be sensitive to causal relevance, but they are not necessarily so. And what does that mean? It means that the degree and the nature of their sensitivity depends, once more, on how they are defined and how they are applied in different contexts and domains. So they can be, they share some, let's say, sensitivity to causal relevance, but it does not necessarily determinate them. They are both dependent on relevance realization and again, once again, on the agent and the agency, let's say, in the environment.
Yeah, actually, he's pointed in the first clip, he pointed out that we use the same mechanism that we use for implication in order, and inference would precisely change our beliefs in a thing. So we would use, I think it's like our agency part. If we want to change our belief about something, we will like make this mind bender that will lead to inference, let's say, and inference will lead to equivocation is just like one way we can do it.
There is one of the main cognitive biases out there. There are more than 180, if I'm not mistaken. It's called the halo effect, and it actually what it does is like you show favoritism to a particular type of group, let's say, or people, or things, or activities, or whatever. So you apply this halo, and that you do not always apply to other circumstances. So this is how I understand this. It has to do with the selector, once again, that Valeria mentioned, and another word that I've noted down based on our interesting discussion is that the word seer. So maybe this selector is also this unconscious seer that every human being has deep inside of them, let's say, somewhere hidden below the surface.
And to expand on the halo effect, another other language for it is the halo and horns effect, which I like because it kind of captures. So you could think of it also, for people who don't know this concept, as a kind of confirmation bias, where like it's commonly kind of used in like the situation where like you meet someone for the first time and that first impression is very positive. So then from that point on, you evaluate what they're doing, from a positive perspective. This cashes out in like educational stuff. So like if a teacher has a student who does really well on their first test, right, that gives the teacher a halo effect saying, oh, this is a smart student. So if they grade their exams thereafter and they know who that student is, then they'll probably grade them more favorably because they're thinking, oh, this is like a smart student. They just made a mistake and left this thing out. So it's probably not like, it's not probably reflecting of some deficit in their knowledge. It's just, they got careless. Whereas the horns effect, which is like a negative version of the halo effect, would be like if a teacher saw a student, they did poorly on the first exam. So then like, the student's like, maybe they're not very bright, or maybe they're not really trying, or whatever it is. And so from that point on, they evaluate that student much more harsher. So they have a horns effect. So hopefully this helps give some sense of this is a kind of cognitive bias that happens. And maybe also you can tie this to relevance realization, because this is maybe the darker side of relevance realization, where you can have these kinds of effects because, well, they're useful and they can be helpful in a lot of contexts. Tag out.
That was very good.
Yeah, it's interesting because.
Please.
I just want to add to that. The things, heuristics and biases, they come from the same mechanism. We just call them biases when they go wrong and heuristics when they go right. Yeah.
This,
Go ahead, Cole.
it seems like possibly, you know, what I've been going on about possibly maybe like the most general application of the halo effect, to say that anything within the information carrying part of my sensory field is good. Just to say, if it's happening, it's good. Then whatever's happening, like it seems like that's where things carry into faith. Like if it's happening, there's going to be a reason. You know, I'm deciding that this is good. Not that all these particular outcomes I would choose, but just things are happening. The world is happening. Therefore, it's good. It kind of brings me back to the, you know, Genesis, or I forget which book, where God was like, he made it and he's like, yeah, it's good. No, this is good. You know, like, who am I to say it's not good? You know, maybe that's the point of that verse, is just to go like, okay, it is, it's good. And that's the heuristic to that, that relieves me of existential angst. And
But sorry, I just want to interject, 'cause I'm curious about, couldn't it also go in the other direction, where like maybe your first experience is a bad one, and so you're like, it's bad, and then it's bad, but then it's bad because of the, you know, so like it's weird because like it can go in both directions, right? Like that'd be the Horn version of this kind of, I don't know what you would call this, like this primordial halo effect of like, if your first experience is traumatic, then you're probably going to predict all the following experiences are probably going to be equally traumatic. So now I'm going to be in a state of, you know, PTSD or something. So I don't know, tag out.
I love that. But it's because it's right now. It's what I'm saying right now. Because if right now is good, then whatever led up to it must be good. And if right now is good, bad can't come from good. So my projection of the only experience of the future I will ever have is my concept of it. And I'll just say, oh, that's coming out of the same nothingness that this good came out of. Nothingness must be good. So I want to go back to Vervaeke's thing he was writing on the board. You know, nothing is better than a sandwich, because all sandwiches are in nothing or nothingness, and nothing is worth living for. Like that's like, there's that turnaround just with the quotation marks. Nothing is worth living for. Nothing.
I wanted to add something on the discussion. I think we've managed to find to make some relevance realization right there. So I think heuristics and biases, they have a connection. Heuristics are approximations. So biases are also approximations. So maybe there is something there that is worthwhile. My 2 cents on the matter.
So I wanted to hear from Algernon before we move to Douglas Harding, and then it's your guys' playground.
I'll go ahead and say, let's go into Douglas Harding.
You want to see? Okay. So let me, so that's not full. Yeah, there it is. Douglas Harding, in person.
We find, I repeat, a world woven of blessings, a world in which love has a chance. You see, in the as-if world, I think love has a very hard time, because we're all separate in that world, face-to-face, head-on collision. Confrontation is the rule of the game and the name of the game in the as-if world. In the as-is world, as presented, it's not confrontation at all. It's, I am empty for you. You are empty for me. We find, I repeat, a world woven.
I love that guy. Thanks for putting that up there, Harris.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so structurally, I want to talk about it a little bit for 12 minutes and then we end the stream. I am just taken by the fact that we all forgot that. He's just like, we all forgot that. We forgot that. Yeah, and I'm like, yeah, that's how I feel. The things that are relevant to me, people don't notice because we all forgot that. And I'm obviously speaking from my own personal bias. It's not because the things that are salient or important to me should be important for other people. Yeah.
So how do we so I'm not super well, I guess, steeped in the Douglas Harding language. So can someone help me unpack the as if and as is world and how that relates to the relevance realization stuff? Anyone want to take a crack at it? Because I have no idea what he's necessarily referring to. I'll just say, I guess, what I think is happening, and someone correct me who has a better sense of his language. Like, is the as if world this like kind of hypothetical narrative construction process I'm doing where it's like, oh yeah, like here's Kevin in a Zoom room, have a conversation with some people about this thing, right? Versus the as is world is like, well, really that's not happening in my phenomenological experience. It's like a thought I'm having maybe about it right now, but also there's a reverberation in my voice, in my chest, there's the pressure of the chair on my legs, the ground on my feet, like there's all this other stuff that's happening. First off, does that sound like a good first pass at this?
Okay. First pass, yeah.
I mean, he talks about what is relevant to him. He talks like about this specific thing. The perspective, the way he sees the world is very relevant to him. And love, and he's like, we all forgot about that thing that is relevant.
Well,
so that's how I see it.
He is saying that, it seems like he is saying that. He's also saying that it's, for Douglas Harding stuff to make any sense, sensation, you can't, he says you can't use any theory. You have to go only what is. Anytime it becomes a theory, then it becomes part of the as if world, you know, like, so he would say, Kevin, you had said, you know, I feel the chair underneath my seat. For me, that makes it into theory, because what I'm actually, you know, like I'm just having this sensation, and then like,
right,
know, yeah. So I mean, you know, it sounds pedantic, but it's also it's such a language is diabolical in that it keeps saying that nothing is not real. You know, it's just because it has no beginning or no end, you know, just because it's eternal.
And that is the as is world you're describing.
And then the as is world, the given world, is this world of sensation. You know, I see, I like John says, to look at but not through my vision, to sense my senses but not through them for a moment, and to remember that all that is, you know, the world is tainted by my bias. Everything is in danger of my attachment to it, and it will end. All the good things turn into bad things. And he's saying, and I remember this talk, he's saying, as I recall, that I'm empty for you. Like, I don't see my face right now. I see something that, you know, it's a really good theory that's me on the screen. It's a good working theory. It helps me pay taxes. But he's saying to go back, like I can go back to the beginning, in a way, into the beginning of the universe in any moment. I can take myself out of the world and see that the world is inside of me, which is, I never want to do that at the shopping mall. You know, like I want this itch to go away, and I want to buy something to fix that itch. But if I compare that itch to nothingness, it's just as big. Everything measured against nothing is exactly the same size. It's the great equalizer.
All right. Can you help me tie this back to relevance realization?
Yes.
Okay.
I just said that with confidence. I don't know.
All right, let's try. Let's improvise. Yeah. So what is okay? Actually, I have no idea. I have no idea where to go with this, because like, would relevance realization be the process of like moving between as if and as is, or like becoming aware that that's even like those are two different ways of relating to the world? Like what?
I don't know, but I love that. I love that distinction. I mean, we ought to have a word for that.
I mean, I think relevance is the part that you notice what is, like, to me.
And
if
what about,
if the thing that is relevant to you, Carlo, is the nothingness, then that will you will notice it everywhere. That's the thing. Like it's what is important to you right now at this moment. So relevance so relevance itself is very subjective, but like realization itself is you can draw some commonalities between the processes of how people find things important to them and how the things stand out. So relevance itself is not the same as relevance realization.
But well, I don't know. I think there might be something to what Kevin's saying, is because nothing is not a thing. If I notice nothingness, I notice, that's the only way I can really notice anything or everything. I notice everything when I notice nothingness. I notice that I am.
A thing is still a thing. Like, to me, nothingness itself, if I pay attention to the absence is still a thing. If I cannot identify what nothingness is or what absence is, then it's not the thing. But the moment I'm focusing on nothingness, well, obviously if I'm focusing on it, then it is a thing. It just it has its own special.
Maybe
I mean,
inference.
even as an inference, yes.
Maybe that's, I mean, maybe that's all it is. Maybe this is ridiculous what I'm talking about, but
it's not. But like there is this special feeling of emptiness, let's say. But you can the moment if you can recognize the emptiness itself, it becomes a thing already.
That's
the
I kind of notice. I only notice nothingness when I notice things, right? When I notice things at the level of phenomenology, and then I go, oh, that has dimension. What the hell gives it dimension? It starts and stops. What's it starting and stopping in? And then I go like, oh my gosh, and then I come back to, you know, like I switch between views, but then there's this memory of just a moment ago having the world inside of me, you know. So maybe it's just a memory, like Rumi's poem about how a thief goes into a house on the first floor, the police come in, and just before they come in, the thief goes to the second floor, and the police come in and they're like, oh, all these letters have been opened, the drawers have been rifled through. Obviously, there's a thief in the house. And then the thief goes to the third floor as the police go to the second floor. Like, it's always this, it's not a thing. Like that's what's important about it, is it's not a thing. It does not, according to like perceptually, it's not a concept. It's like, I don't see any end to that darkness that my vision is floating in.
I get it. To me, it's just linguistically. So linguistically, the thing that is not a thing, that we cannot experience it, measure it, or understand it, if you can name it with a word, becomes a thing.
That's what the left brain thinks.
Yes, that's like perhaps like there's like, to me, the nothingness, the emptiness, the absence of a thief is a thing already. Welcome. So, guys, I want to give you a little bit of checkout before we close, and I would like to start with Valeria.
Why me? No, start with
Oh,
somebody else.
okay, Harris. Fine.
Okay, first of all, I would like to thank everyone. This is my first time I appear in this series. It was really a pleasure to be here. I've gained a lot of insights from this wonderful discussion, and I hope also our audience. And what I will keep is that I really believe that John's work, as the years pass by, becomes more and more relevant. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Kara, for inviting.
Thank you for being here. Kevin.
Oh, well, man. Well, I guess echo the sentiment of being grateful for the space because it's fun to kind of work out stuff out loud and get perspective on it. Yeah, I guess maybe a closing thought is, yeah, I think it's just to rehash the initial sentiment I tried to propose, which is the sense of like, why does relevance realization matter? It's like, why should I care about it? And I think it's this notion of, well, if you can care about it, if you become aware of it with the language, right, which makes you kind of easier to latch onto with the word, then it gives you the capacity to maybe become aware of that process and then maybe modify that process if it's not functioning in a way that's beneficial for your own well-being. So yeah, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Arjuna.
We went a lot of different ways with this. It kind of points at an idea to me that is a deep problem with philosophy in modern times, which is there's the things that philosophers and people who study philosophy talk about in great detail and try to make into a scientific discipline, and then also not let go of the ineffable, etc. And then we get into really complicated, convoluted, oh my God, just if I'm somebody who's uninitiated and I just watched the conversation that we had, I have no effing idea what the hell relevance realization is. That's my impression of it. Like definitionally and the different number of threads, and they're pointing vaguely, fuzzily at something, but it just seems so so tenuous and so convoluted in the end that I wonder, like we're doing this philosophical thing about it, and I really wish that philosophy were something that much more tangible, where you could just like not get into all the complexity or whatever and just say, no, it's like this. Here's what we mean. Try to pay attention to that. You have these, whatever it is. And then I think there's a tremendous amount of good stuff in philosophy and in cognitive science. And this conversation felt a lot like we blurred a lot of things together in ways that I'm not sure that we helped advance any clarity, at least in my mind. But this has been a topic of some fuzziness for me, but it doesn't feel like it got clearer.
I mean, it got clearer for me. Like I went through the ideas, precise preset agenda, and all of those questions, like as people were discussing, even fuzzily, the relevant information stood out for me. But yeah, that idea that, let's say, pre-chewed, clear, is very important right now.
Like I couldn't, if a friend asked me and said, so what, you just did a whole podcast for 2 hours on relevance realization, so what is it? And I'd be like, okay, here we go. It's not going to be very clear.
I think that we find important, like Valeria said, we would exchange relevances with important. The thing that we find important to us at any given moment, not like this moment, this is important to us. That's relevant. That's what is relevant for us. That's it.
I mean, To me, the useful lesson maybe is to answer Gilad's earlier question of, of what use is this concept. I think the recognition that we do it, that we're filtering the world, all the possible qualia and our own thoughts. We're trying to find this relevance, and in doing so, we're ignoring a bunch of things and we're weighting things. We're saying that's important, that's not important. We're subject to at least 108 human cognitive biases, probably more. So I think all of those things are useful, just so that one can help navigate their own mind space. I'll hand off.
Okay, Carl.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I agree that I don't have any better definition of relevance realization at the end of this. And just want to apologize for getting caught up in my passion for nothing, and injecting it so many times into this conversation. But I really treasure talking to all of you. It's such an honor, to have this opportunity. So thanks for having me here, Kara.
Yeah, you're welcome. Also, nothingness and relevance realization, they do go hand in hand, like coffee and the water. It's like extremely important. Like I actually do see the relevance in it. And I give the final word to the queen herself, Valeria.
It just threw me off. You're doing it on purpose. I like what Kevin said about recognizing the process, is having a word for the process and realizing that there is a process happening that makes things appear important to us or appear relevant to us is a good reason to do it. And the fact that it's not in us and it's not in the world, but in between always, that it's also super important. And I also think that recognizing the limits of our understanding is also important. So if we come out of the conversation realizing that we know less than we thought we knew, I think that that's also a valid thing. And especially in regards to this, John comes up with all these terms because we didn't have language to talk about it before. So to assume that we know what he's talking about just because the words sound familiar, it's maybe cheapening the words. And in regards to having clear, precise definitions, in after Socrates, he's always pointing us to go beyond that, to see the truth in between the different perspectives and the different aspects and the different ways of seeing. So not to seek conclusion, but emergence. So I think that, I think we are honoring his work by not trying to just nail things down. As Kara said, that the Tao that can be named is not a real Tao, and we are trying to figure out what things are that are beyond words and very difficult to name and to talk about. And sometimes it will be clumsy.
I really like that. If I come out from a thing having more questions than before, it's a good result. It's if you go into a thing, I know all the answers, and then you come out, now I know that I know nothing.
That's the aporia that John likes to talk about so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you everybody in the comments. I do value your presence. Please come back next week and see you.